Today's episode of Shit Island is brought to you by mayonnaise. Mayonnaise, the spiciest of flavors.
Welcome to Shit Island.
Hello.
Welcome, people.
Episode 4, right?
Yes.
Fourth one.
Episode 4 already. Time flies, doesn't it?
It does fly. Hey, new microphones all around pretty much, right?
Indeed. We've been investing in this show thanks to all our lovely Patreon supporters giving us money.
Yeah, so let us know in the comments how wonderful we sound.
So,
topic of today.
Yes, the topic of today, consumer activism. Before we go there, we'd like to thank our patrons over at patreon.com/azure scapegoat. And a special thanks to Joshua Cheeseman, not Jojo, Emlyn, and
Nguyen Chong Ming.
that name. Thank you all.
Thank
you very much. Yeah, that's cool. I mean, you are literally keeping this show going, and we really appreciate it.
The topic for today, as you've probably seen in the title of this episode, is consumer activism. And what do we mean when we say consumer activism, Peter?
Consumer activism is the belief that, if you want to boil it down, it's the belief that if you spend money on one thing, or also referred to as voting with your wallet, then you can have an ethical and moral impact on the market and on the capitalistic system. So basically, if you buy something that's organic, then you're making the planet a better place. Or if you are buying something where some proceeds of the purchase price goes to a worthy cause, then that in and of itself is making the planet a better place.
Can I just say something?
Yeah?
GMOs are fucking great. Like, GMOs, genetically modified organics, are, the fucking basis of our entire civilization. Like, we've modified crops and bred animals since we learned how to do those things, like fucking 4,000 years ago. And just because we can now do it more efficiently in labs doesn't mean that it's somehow worse than when we took like corn, which used to be this like tiny little thing that looked like wheat, and turned it into fucking corn on the cob. And like, that's not natural, but it's fucking delicious.
I honestly don't know enough about this to really get into it, but I have heard of some developments within vegetables and fruits where GMOs have made it possible for them to grow in the desert or in very adverse environments and climates, which I think is a very good thing, especially if we're,
agricultural science, basically most of what agricultural science is producing new GMOs, making vegetables and fruits and crops healthier, making them grow easier and not fail as often. Like, GMOs are fucking awesome. GMOs have all of my support. They're like stem cells. Like, put more money into that. I'm just mad at liberals who are like, I only buy organic and non-GMO and gluten-free and soy-free and without pesticides and without blah, blah, blah. It's like, you're buying stuff without any good in it. Like, you're just anti-science at this point. It's like, I only buy melons that don't have vaccines. It's like, fucking...
Oh, that's a beautiful analogy.
Yeah.
I guess in order to kind of discuss this, I could play the devil's advocate and just go, well, what's wrong with buying something that seems or, advertises itself as more ethical in capitalism from like a liberal perspective?
From a liberal perspective, there's nothing wrong with buying things that you believe are more ethical, because from a liberal perspective, it's the individual that has all of the power. And the structural problems, the market itself is infallible. The problem lies with the individuals and the consumers. And if all of the consumers buy ethical stuff, then the market is ethical. And if the consumers don't buy ethical things, then it's the consumers that aren't ethical. So the problem always lies with them.
I presume none of us are fans of Monsanto or the patenting of like, DNA or whatnot. Because I know that's going to be raised in any discussion about GMOs. So I think we better clear that out of the way now.
I'm not really a fan of like patents and copyright in general.
Well, there you have it, people. There's a little disclaimer.
I will say I'm a fan of it in a capitalistic system, but I think ideally, if we're talking about it from a practical perspective, then I'm for it. But if we're talking about if we're talking about after the end of capitalism, then I think they should go away, basically.
I think especially within science, it's bad. That and like patenting DNA within agricultural sciences is a bad idea because all you're doing is preventing further research.
Essentially, yeah. But it also has the under capitalism. I guess you could argue that it has the effect of incentivizing further research into very expensive and cost-heavy fields as well. But again, that's following capitalist logic. But I think you still have to in this current world order.
Yeah, that's not really how those patents work. They just prevent any future research to be done on these things, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, it does. It does create for an environment where only the very wealthy corporations can afford to do research, which is very unfortunate. I agree.
Yeah, and also leads to biased research a lot of the time.
Oh yeah, true.
Anyway, we were talking about consumer activism.
Yes.
And what's the problem with it? What's the problem with voting with your wallet? And I heard a metaphor that was interesting, which was, if you're a liberal and you truly believe in voting with your wallet, and that the market is like a big democratic system where you put in your vote, you vote for the things that you like. Well, if you look at your bank account and how much money you have, that is how many votes you have. And then if you
guess
look
how
at
many votes Jeff Bezos has.
Yes, exactly. If you then look at how many votes Bill Gates has or Jeff Bezos has, then it becomes clear that rich people have more votes than poor people. And is that a good democratic system, do you think?
I would say no.
Well, you could see where we would have a problem with it, right? It does seem like this is the argument that capitalists use, especially in simplistic videos on YouTube, where they try to explain capitalism to them. It seems, they do take this 1910 approach to economics before the conglomerations, before late capitalism, before all the corporations started going together and creating a very uneven playing field, when you just had mom and pop stores competing with each other, which is not reality now. I mean, you just have to have two eyes to see how, if you go to any city now, the stores are all the same, the options are all the same, you get the same brands, the same everything, because there's just a couple of big corporations and conglomerations who control everything in pretty much every market available that people actually use. So, I mean, it doesn't work the way that capitalists say when they talk about voting with your wallet. Because
there are a lot of those images where you have like a bunch of companies that you recognize and like brands and like A&W and stuff. And then like there's like not a pie chart, but like a flow chart. And like every small company eventually leads to one of like 4 big corporations that like owns everything in America. Yes. So even when you think that you're buying from like an independent mom and pop shop, usually you're not. You're buying from a company that's owned by a company that's owned by a company that's owned by Coca-Cola.
Yes.
Yeah, in the Netherlands, if you go like grocery shopping, like 90% of what you'll find in the supermarkets is going to be owned by one of 2 corporations. And that's it.
Yeah, same in Denmark. You have 2 big corporations that own pretty much every one of the stores that aren't German. So that's how capitalism works today. So all of the examples that they'll give you at PragerU and at and in all these short introductions to capitalism on right-wing YouTube channels, they aren't really realistically aligned with what real-life late capitalism is. And I guess in order to explain late capitalism, it's basically what happened after the Berlin Wall fell and the Soviet Union collapsed, when neoliberalism and Reaganism and the economic dominance of the West became everything.
Yeah, and that's also part of the problem with the idea of ethical consumption under capitalism, was like a lot of products, you're still going to need to buy a bunch of these things just in order to live. But what's your alternative here? If basically everything you buy is just going to be owned ultimately by one of 2 companies who both are shit. Yeah. There's no possibility here for ethical consumption if there's no competition here. There's no alternative here for an actual ethical consumption here. That just isn't an option.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have you probably, and you folks listening at home have probably come across the kind of leftists that want to try to be completely independent from capitalism, who grow their own food in their vegetable garden on their balcony, and they go, I don't know, thrift shopping, and they go dumpster diving. David Rovix has a song called I'm a Better Anarchist Than You, which is a very hilarious satirical song about an anarchist who believes himself better than everyone else because he doesn't go to restaurants, he eats donuts that he finds in dumpsters, and he doesn't have sex because heterosexual relationships are inherently unequal. He just abstains from everything, and he doesn't drive a car. Just basically has transformed his entire life into being an absolute shithole, but at least at the end of the day, he can say that he's better than you.
That's great.
And, one of the arguments, because I've heard this from genuine leftist people, is, well, why can't we just eat, grow the food that we grow in our own gardens and buy secondhand clothes and just not buy anything from any capitalist ever? And the answer to that is it's a pretty privileged thing to be able to live that kind of life, to be able to be completely independent, because most people have to go to work and they maybe don't have time to have a vegetable garden. And also, I don't think you can survive on only vegetables. I feel like that's a
Also,
pretty ambitious...
a vegetable garden that's going to produce a couple of afternoons worth of food for the whole year. That's not enough to live on. You need a proper farm for that, and that's a lot of money to invest in this.
You will need an apartment to live in. That means paying rent to a capitalist company. You will need water and electricity and heat. I guess you can abstain from heat, electricity, maybe. Water is pretty important if you want a flushing toilet.
Nah, you don't need that. You just dig a pit somewhere. We can work around this stuff.
The point is that in order to live in accordance with these values, supposedly, you have to live a pretty terrible life.
Basically have to turn back into a hunter-gatherer somewhere in the woods.
Yeah.
Yeah, unless you're going for that Unabomber chic look, then definitely go for the basic amenities, yeah.
There's nothing inherently wrong with trying to limit the amount of stuff that you buy. I think it's good to buy secondhand, and I think it's good to limit how much stuff that you buy. But the point is, just because you are a leftist doesn't mean that you have to try to live your life abstaining from capitalism, because nothing is going to come from that. The only person who might benefit from that is you. You might feel better about yourself, but you won't, abolish capitalism that way. And ultimately, when you're doing this, when you're abstaining from participating in the capitalist economy, you're buying into the liberal idea of voting with your wallet. You've just decided not to vote.
Zizek has a very good way of looking at it, I think, when he talks about consumption under neoliberalism, where he says that it used to be under capitalism in the 50s and 60s that when you bought something, there wasn't any other element to it than, hard exchange of money. And you would always walk away feeling a little, and I think we all still feel this way. When we spend a lot of money on something, we feel bad inside. We feel like we've let go of something and it's going to cause us stress down the line that we've somehow, given something away from us and potentially put ourselves in future money problems by buying something. But he's saying that what's happened now with this Starbucks economy, where when you buy a cup of coffee, you're not just buying a cup of coffee from evil capitalists. You're buying, the welfare of Ethiopian children, or you're helping someone in the third world, or you're helping a children's hospital in your area. And that kind of dichotomy where you're no longer a bad person for spending money, you're a good person for spending money, and you should keep coming back to Starbucks and spending money at Starbucks.
The context of this is stores that advertise that whenever you buy this and this, they will donate the proceeds, or 1% of the proceeds, to a good cause. And so you feel good for spending money on something when you otherwise would have felt guilty.
Yeah.
Well, I think the worst example of this is last year I flew over to the US for a school trip. And when I was buying my plane ticket, they had this little option pay, 1% extra and we'll donate this to like some reforestation program in Ethiopia, whatever it was. I was like, wait, what? I'm gonna have to pay you extra so that you can go, I don't know, spend some of that money on maybe a good cause somewhere. Like, hang on.
Yeah. A lot of stores in the US do that. When you're at the store buying groceries and you check out and they're like, would you like to give $1 to charity? Would you like to give $1 to save the Brazilian rainforest children?
No, fuck the Brazilian rainforest children. What have the Brazilian rainforest children ever done for me? Also, this is a bullshit economic system, so no,
McDonald's has that Ronald McDonald House for orphans or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. The whole economy of advertising and feeling good about giving money to a corporation where the ideal outcome for the corporation is for you to feel as good as possible by giving them money is something that is constantly in flux, especially considering that advertising works less and less on people. We're better than ever at determining who are trying to sell us something and for what reason. So they keep having to become more and more savvy and keep psychologically being a step ahead of us as consumers with their advertisements. And you see that now in the boycott campaigns against Nike and Gillette and all these companies that make these very overtly political campaigns whose only purpose is to make people who disagree with it outraged enough to tweet about it and to talk about how lame they are and how they're never using Gillette ever again. Of course, the purpose being that they've now tweeted the word Gillette. So that's free advertising for Gillette.
The other side of people who then feel like if they sort of agree with whatever political statement that company made, now sort of under awkward position of having to defend like a company, which it's a weird position to be in. Like, I'm fucking supports Nike with their Kaepernick thing. It's like, what?
If you remember that old Pepsi commercial with Kylie Jenner, you'll notice that
one,
they were treading that fine line between not political at all and clear political statement, because it was like, there's almost a message in there about like
the aesthetics
police
of being political without being political.
Yeah. And he made a lot of people very angry, but as Peter said, ultimately generated a lot of traffic. A lot of people were talking about Pepsi for a few weeks.
Yeah, that's true.
So I mean, they probably benefited from that.
I guess
the same thing happened to Jake Paul when he filmed someone in the Japanese forest who committed suicide. He gained a lot of subscribers from it. PewDiePie, after the many racism allegations, kept gaining subscribers. It's all about, I think some sleazy advertising people realize that the cost benefit of making everyone angry is more benefit than cost. So now it's just everywhere, and I think we're going to have to be ready for it to really take over very soon. We're going to be seeing a lot of Care Bears talking about toxic masculinity and
I don't know.
What else? Pringles talking about.
Maybe Pringles is going to bring up like the Jewish question,
like male gaze.
The male gaze. I don't know. Either the male gaze or the Jewish question. One of the two.
Pringles is going to come out in favor of communism.
Yeah, maybe Wendy's is going to be pro Richard Spencer. I don't know, just to outrage the leftists.
I think Wendy's more of a Bernie bro, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Wendy's a Bernie bro.
That does lead us into the topic of woke brands. We've seen a lot of
transition.
You've probably seen these various brands on Twitter, like Wendy's, or just most fast food companies. I feel like Burger King has started getting into it now, where they're like they're tweeting memes, and not like the kinds of memes you would usually see companies post that are like 10 years old and really unfunny, but like actually topical new memes that are like fresh, even for like the most internet savvy people, and they're like really trying to relate to you, and they make jokes and they like burn people on Twitter, and they like act, oh my god, so unprofessional, like, and like they're so much like a person and not like a company, and oh my god, isn't it so funny that Wendy's tweeted #dab or whatever. And
jeez.
obviously what this is a marketing campaign. And they're
Yes.
trying to appear woke and relatable and progressive and teenage-ish, when in reality they're just trying to sell you burgers.
Yeah, I think it was Naomi Klein, No Logo, which talks about companies they're not specifically when they're doing advertising, not really selling you the product itself. Like Nike isn't selling you just the shoes in their advertisement. They're selling you sort of a lifestyle, a way of viewing the world and whatnot, and then relating that to their product, which you should totally buy. But the actual thing in the advertisement isn't their fucking shoes. It's there's some sort of lifestyle way of looking at the world, and
Yeah.
this meme
yeah.
shenanigans seems to be the next step of that.
By the way, a huge shout out to H Bomber Guy and Sarah Z, who made some incredible YouTube videos about this specific topic, and I believe Peter Coffin made a great video about it too recently. It's suddenly come up a lot in conversation. I've been thinking of talking about it for about a couple of months now, so it's very serendipitous that we're talking about this right now as all these great videos are coming out. But definitely go on YouTube, search out H Bomber Guy's videos on woke brands, and Sarah Z's video on woke brands, and Peter Coffin, I believe he has one too.
And also, if
anyway, sorry, go
any
on.
of those three want to come on the Shit Island podcast, email us.
Yes,
That would be
let us
amazing.
know.
I'm a huge fan of all three. So
Or you can tweet us now. We have a Twitter account.
Yes,
we do.
It's twitter.com/shitislandshow.
yes, tweet it. Also, is any of us ever going to check that thing? Because I'm not. But
Oh yeah. I've got it on my phone.
sweet.
Good.
That's
Yeah,
sweet.
We're gonna.
I created it, but I've logged out. So
I'm
Peter
not
will
touching
probably.
we're all
it.
gonna check it.
You want to contact me? Go on the Goats Discord. That's
Yeah, Jules still doesn't have any social medias.
I just have Discord.
But I'll make a deal with you, listener. If you have something you want to tweet to Jules, tweet it to Shit Island Show, and then I'll show
Another
it to him.
way to contact me is to just leave a comment under any of these episodes. I'm checking them.
Yeah,
out.
you're really active in the comment section. It's really funny.
Yeah, like, just every day I'm checking. Like, are there any new comments? Are there new comments? So if you want to reach me that way, that should work.
I can't believe Jules is more active at reading my comments than I am.
But
Yeah.
I haven't reached a point yet where I've just given up all faith in the comment section. Like somehow I still
You
have
will,
some hope.
eventually.
I know I will. But for now,
So, ethical consumption.
yes.
Is it a
Yes.
thing? Can you consume ethically under capitalism? I guess the question is, if we are Marxists, and we assume that private property, where in a capitalist, an owner of private modes of production, exploits his workers and takes the surplus value that they create for himself. And if we compare two privately owned properties, and one of which is, I don't know, advertising itself as being woke and progressive and Bernie Bros and organic and GMO free and without vaccines, can you really say that it's unethical to buy from the other guy?
I mean, it goes into your definition of what's ethical and what's unethical, because you can if we're debating capitalism's merit as a whole, then I would argue that it's impossible for you to buy anything under capitalism that's done in an ethical transaction way, because every single piece of thing that you're working with is the result of labor that was produced in a way that I find unethical under wage labor. So I think if you want to get to the nook and cranny of the argument of, is it possible to have something be made for you in an ethical way, then not under capitalism, I think would be my answer.
I would say that there's probably maybe really work hard, you can find like this one very specific example of ethical, but in general there's no ethical concern. But I would say that there are definitely more unethical ways of producing and consuming things than other ways.
Like, should you go to McDonald's or should you go to your local hamburger worker cooperative that's
Yes.
locally sourced and eco-friendly, and where the workers democratically own and decide things on their workplace, probably go to the cooperative, if you can.
Oh, I was going to say the McDonald's. Oh, yeah, the cooperative. The cooperative. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're really craving those fries, can't stop you.
Oh my God, they're so
In many
good.
ways,
No.
I think it's also a bit silly to put all this responsibility in a way on the consumer, because
Yes.
how for like a lot of products, like you mean just follow like the supply chain of a bunch of these products. You go all the way,
Yeah.
like parts of it are made in Asia, other parts in Africa, other parts, Latin America. This stuff comes from all over the world, and you got to figure out from all those like subcontractors and subcontractors, like who made what in what conditions. That's just not possible. And even those people themselves, those companies themselves, don't have a clue a lot of the time, because they just tell some company in India, like, I don't know, to bring us 10,000 shirts, and then that company's like, sure. Then they go to a bunch of other local companies like, hey, we need so many shirts, and they go to other people and like, oh, we need this, and
Yeah. I mean,
there's
I think,
no way for you in like the supermarket to figure out like, oh, is this shirt made ethically? You have no clue. There's no way for you to find out. There's no way for anyone basically to find this out.
Yeah. Like if you're buying a smartphone and like the computer chips and the circuit boards in that phone, where do the minerals for that come from? Where does the gold come from? Is it mined in Ghana by child slaves, or does it come from a regular mine that's not
Which
using
just has
child
normal
slaves?
slaves, adult slaves.
Normal
What are we
slaves.
working with?
Wage slaves.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. You don't know. It doesn't say on the packaging where the gold is from,
Typically, they also won't advertise, made with child slaves.
Yeah, and you can apply Jules' logic to the Bernie Bro t-shirts as well. Which factory was that t-shirt made at? Like, was it made in Indonesia? Was it made in America? And under which conditions? And
Where did the cotton come from originally?
Yeah, well, like a few years ago, there was this factory, I think, in Bangladesh, or maybe it was India. It was that part of the world anyway, which like collapsed and like a few hundred people died. And officially, no company did any business with this, factory. But they dig through the rubble and they find like labels of, Zara, Victoria's Secret, Prada, you name it, like big names, small names, so everything's in there. Like, it's all just made there in terrible conditions.
Like a lot of companies in America, I think it was Walmart was one of them, but it was like just big, really big chains. They went to like a legit company in India. And they were like, hey, we need shirts. And then without knowing it, that company turned to sweatshops, which utilized child labor. And then never told, Walmart about it.
Yeah, exactly.
And so if not even Walmart knew about it, then how on earth could a
you as a
consumer know about
consumer
it?
supposed to know about this?
Yeah.
You don't even know the contacts Walmart has over in India. Like, how are you supposed to figure this out? You can't. It's just...
Yeah. And that's kind of why some people on the left reach the conclusion that, well, I'll just won't buy anything. I'll just live completely on my own. I just will never buy anything from anyone, because you never know where it's from. It's probably exploiting someone.
Probably is, yes.
And then the other side of the coin is, well, because we can't know everything, and because we can't be informed consumers or whatever, and because everything we buy will have come from the exploitation of someone eventually, but we still have to live, we might as well not care what we buy.
Yeah, that's why I buy a lot of blood diamonds from the Congo.
As we all do.
They look very nice. Like, the little bit of child blood on it brings out now the colour, I find.
Yeah.
they taste great.
That too, like, good. If you can, like, like you have salty, you can sort of crush it over, your food. If you can do that with diamond, that really brings out that. It's a lot of work, but it's so worth it if you have the time to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the whole a final thing, I guess, for me is that it does seem like, especially in America, this optimism, and it makes sense to me anyway, why this very optimistic way of looking at consumer activism is most prevalent in America. If you look at America from a historical perspective, they kind of started off as a nation. The whole basis for their rebellion against the British started off as consumer activism when they dumped tea in the Boston Harbor. They said, we're not going to buy your tea anymore, and that more or less made them a nation. And since then, there's been this kind of like interaction with the economy where you believe that if you are, entrepreneurial enough, if you just, give it all you've got and create something great, then you will be rewarded by these righteous men who come from families who founded this nation. And there's a whole mythology around consumer activism in America, and to an extent too, I think, in all of the Anglican world, that I don't think we really have in the more Saxon part of the world.
I thought you were about to say civilized.
I mean, that's a subtext.
Well, I mean, I didn't say it, but I'm kidding. Wink, wink. No, no. But yeah, it makes sense that to me, it seems like those things are tied together, that consumption can be ethical because it started off America as a country.
I'm not entirely certain I would call dumping tea in the Boston Harbor consumer activism.
Sort of.
Semantics,
I can see the arguments.
It was about taxes.
But there's also some other stuff that went on at the time of like how I think they couldn't produce like clothing in during the colonial era. They had to export all their textiles to Britain. They would then process them into clothes, and that would then be shipped back. So I think like George Washington, when he became president, he was like, I need a suit. I'm not going to buy one of those fucking British suits now. I need an American-made suit. So he especially had someone brought in from the other side of the country to make him this suit.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, other side of the country at this time was like,
well, yeah, they still had to like go with like a horse, I guess.
Yeah, horse and carriage.
It's still like a
it wasn't
journey,
California,
probably. No, not California, but it's still like a couple of days or so on horseback at least.
Anyway.
That was still Mexico back then.
Yeah.
So, I guess my final point is basically buy things that make you happy. And when you want to abstain from buying something because you think it's unethical or bad or contributing to something bad, then do that. If you want to bring about socialism, it doesn't matter what you consume or don't consume. If bringing about socialism is the thing that you care about, then you need to join a political party. You need to agitate and organize. I know those are words thrown around a lot, and a lot of people know what they mean, but you need to talk to the people in your life about socialism. You need to talk to the people in your workplace about worker democracy. And you need to fight for social justice wherever you can. And, spend your life being an activist. And that doesn't include giving, $1 to the Brazilian rainforest children. That's not activism. That's not really going to help anyone.
And I guess in connection to that, I'd like to add that there are, one of the things that you will notice, and that I notice anyway in the online community, is that there's a lot of people, a lot of leftists that know so much, that have just such vast libraries of knowledge available to them. And I would just like to urge them to, join the conversation somehow, create something, organize, create, actually use your knowledge for something in praxis that advances your ideals and the things that you'd like to do. Because one of the most frustrating things for me is when people have all this knowledge and don't share it or don't use it for anything, because it's just it's such a waste.
And please don't think that internet activism counts as real activism.
What?
No.
This podcast is totally activism. Come on.
We are not being activists right now.
Yes, we are. It's the only way I can sleep at night.
Well, I would say activism comes in many forms. It's just, as long as what I see YouTube channels as, for instance, and even to some extent, just this or, Chapo or whatever, it's a type of propagating ideas and spreading stuff and having a conversation about important topics. And that also counts but it doesn't mean anything unless people actually, do something and fight for what they believe in. And hopefully that's kind of what all of this online environment and atmosphere thing leads to, or in some way inspires to anyway. Because, if we don't do anything, then this is all for nothing.
But also do actually go outside. So, Julia, you had something to say about boycotts.
Yeah, no, so there's like two thoughts I had on this. Like, first, just a silly thing which was annoying me a while back. When Trump first became president, I saw this article like how to boycott Trump, and basically just what things you shouldn't be buying or going to if you don't like Trump. And it was like 10 things, and literally it's all like Trump hotels, Trump casinos, there's anything with the Trump name on it, like Trump steaks, Trump vodka. Don't buy those things. Like, wow, shit. I really needed a fucking list of things with Trump's name on it to realize, hey, that's related to the fucking dickhead I don't like. I shouldn't be buying that. Thank you, internet. Also, if I had the money to, buy that stuff, I probably would support this guy because I'd be a rich asshole. It's the other side. But on a more serious note, last year, back during the dark days of my sociology minor, I had to read this article on boycotts and their effectiveness. And for the life of me, I can't find that thing. Maybe there will be a link to the actual paper in the description. Don't count on it, but I'll try to find it. But I'll do some digging for that. Anyway, the point it was making was basically boycotts generally don't really work. Because generally people don't give a shit. The company generally doesn't really give a shit, and there aren't enough people involved in the boycott to make any impact, so it doesn't do anything. The only exceptions would be if the people who do the boycott get a lot of media attention. In that case, it can sometimes work, and it only really gets this media attention if it's about some fairly generic issue everyone can get behind. I don't know, if some company is found to have literal child slaves, okay, fine.
Yeah.
And it's really clear that they knew about, the child slavery and whatnot, and okay.
The owner of the store is a pedophile.
Yeah, in such cases, the boycott will have some effect, but otherwise, if it doesn't get this broad media attention, and it don't really get that if there's it has brought appeal to many people, then it's just not going. It's just a pointless exercise. That's basically the conclusion of the study. It's, if I remember correctly, like I said, it's been a year since I read it, so might not be entirely accurate, but from what I remember, that was basically what the study was arguing.
The interesting thing about the controversy in brands is that the only way it seems to be effective when you're boycotting something is if you have, say, someone who said something very controversial or did something very controversial. I remember the boycott of Bill O'Reilly was very effective because the protest wasn't he's a bad person and I disagree with him. The protest was he said something very nasty about a very specific type of people, and that's very effective against the advertisers, or the advertisers don't want to be connected to people who say something bad about an entire group of customers, essentially. So you don't want someone who defames Jewish people or black people, because those people all buy coffee machines or yoga mats or whatever you're selling. So if people are complaining that some anti-Semitic radio host or TV host said something that made them very upset, then that actually could have an effect on whether they want to keep airing ads on that personality's platform. Yeah. But yeah, in most other cases, it just seems to make them more money when you protest them.
Yeah, there's that. I remember actually, I forget what game it was, but EA made this game and then literally paid people to protest against it because they figured this will make good advertisement. So I can't.
I think there's
remember
some
what game it
conspiracy
was, but-
stuff going on about Sony Pictures, the movie studio, doing the same thing with the Ghostbusters movies, and maybe even Marvel doing it with the new Captain Marvel movie.
Jeez, right.
Like fake outrage to drum up some kind of civic duty to watch it.
Yeah, could be. I don't
I'm
know.
skeptical. I don't. Nah.
I just remember that EA literally paid people to protest EA.
I mean, it's been more or less confirmed that Sony has paid movie reviewers to give good reviews to movies. So, I mean, I wouldn't put it past them.
Yeah, but paying someone to do, be in favor of your product, that makes a lot of sense. That's pretty standard, but...
It's not far removed from paying someone to write something angry on Facebook about the movie.
That's true, but it's a little less obvious, but yeah.
I guess.
Maybe people are doing that now, like you said, bad publicity is good publicity now, so...
It is, yeah, it seems like it.
Your talk about Bill O'Reilly and how like advertisers pulled out reminded me of the World Cup in Qatar.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which has been ripe with scandals regarding,
Slavery.
basically slave labor. They pull in immigrant laborers to work construction at terribly unsafe conditions, and I think multiple people die each day
Probably.
on this construction. And I think the estimates are like thousands of people are going to be dead by the time that all the stadiums and stuff are done.
Whoa.
And while the immigrant workers are working the construction, their supervisors have taken their passports and visas away, so they can't go home.
Yeah, they're just
So
stuck
they're just
there.
stuck there.
That's awful. I haven't heard of any of this.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah, yes.
Is this ongoing? Is this happening right now?
Yes, yeah, no, it's happening right now as we speak in Qatar.
Oh, wow.
For the World Cup.
But no, it's really awful what's going on there, yeah. But
Yeah.
is this really going to stop people from watching the World Cup when it happens? No.
No, it's not. But my point was that the 2022 Qatar World Cup series is sponsored by Adidas, by Coca-Cola, by McDonald's, Budweiser, Vivo. So basically, I think John Oliver did a bit about this where he tried to get McDonald's, Budweiser, Visa, Coca-Cola, Adidas, all of the American brands to pull out to stop sponsoring Qatar. And despite all of the human trafficking and slavery allegations, well, I mean not allegations, actual
proven.
No advertisers have pulled out.
Jesus.
Surprise.
Not a single one. They're all just well, whatever. It's football.
Yeah, people are gonna watch it anyway. Why would we pull
And
out?
it was the same with the Rio.
Yeah,
The Rio World Cup, ripe with scandals, and there were protests in the streets of Brazil, and complaints about how the government was spending millions and billions on football stadiums that no one was ever going to use again after this. Meanwhile, people were starving.
Yeah.
The government wasn't paying attention to them. Did any advertisers pull out? No. Did anyone boycott the World Cup? No. Everyone who was going to watch the World Cup watched it anyway. Because it's the World Cup.
Yeah, and case in point, I mean, that's why capitalism can't be what I would consider ethical in and of itself, because if it comes down to doing the right thing or making money, they're always gonna, in this system, choose making more money and not considering, what would be, quote unquote, the right thing to do. So you can only in a limited exchange do the right thing as a capitalist company. But still, I completely agree with your sentiment about still we have to exist in this world, and we can't just exclude ourselves from the world and then call ourselves good. We should be focused on making the world good and all of us good collectively, but we can't do that unless we participate in this world until we have a chance to change it.
Yeah. So I guess my final attempt to hammer this home would be, if you truly opposed the 2016, the Rio World Cup. If you truly opposed the World Cup in Rio, you should not have boycotted it. You should have joined the protesters in the streets of Rio de Janeiro.
That's the only ethical thing to do in that situation, I'd say.
Yeah. That's kind of what I'm trying to get across. It's like, you not watching the World Cup is not going to change anything.
Correct.
But if you're actually on the streets, actually agitating, propagating for change in Brazil and trying to bring down a corrupt government in Brazil, that's real change.
Yeah.
That's somewhere where you can actually influence stuff and actually try to make the world better.
Yeah.
Staying at home and not watching the World Cup is not going to change anything, because fucking everyone is going to watch it anyway.
Yeah, non-participation isn't an option. You're participating one way or the other. If you're not in some way demonstrating against it, you're permitting it, essentially.
Yep.
I mean, that sounds very aggressive, but that's the truth, because it's just the world order. I mean, it's the neoliberal way or the highway, basically. So unless you're protesting it actively in your way, then you're just participating in it, even if you're not directly watching it or condoning it.
Yep.
I did just think of a actual example of ethical consumption under capitalism, and that is supporting us on Patreon.
Yes. That's the only example. That's
the
true.
only
Indeed.
ethical
Yeah.
choice.
Yes, the goat doesn't have us chained up in the shed. We're not forced to do this podcast. It's all ethical and whatnot.
You're not wage laborers because I don't pay you.
Yeah, exactly. we're basically volunteers here, I guess.
For now.
For now.
For now.
We'll see when this blows up. I don't know. If this starts making like, I don't know, 10,000 a month, I'm gonna be like, hey, goat.
Yeah, no,
but
that's all
it's
mine.
Patreon money.
That's my money. Thanks.
We're independent contractors.
Your interns.
Oh, that's great.
We're
Yeah,
interns.
you're gaining experience. You can put this on
yeah.
your CV. Later.
Yeah, no, was a co-host on Shit Island for a while. Until I asked
Yeah.
for not even a raise, just an income.
Yeah.
So, before we move on to the Humanities Good corner of this week, we have 2 emails from our listeners. One of which is from
Cool.
Ryan Van Buskirk, who is asking us about, essentially to boil it down, is asking us, how would intellectual property work under socialism?
That's a very good topic.
He asks, if I wanted to write a book and distribute it, how on earth would any of that work? Same goes for the production of film and music. Do the authors or producers of these get any form of compensation for the production of these goods originally made by them?
I think that sounds like something you're very qualified to answer, Goat.
Yes, you deal with this one, Goat.
Yes.
You think so? Okay.
Yes. You own the website of, Socialism 101.
Yeah, I guess that would make me sort of the expert.
Yeah, there you go.
The answer to this question, of course, as with all things, depends on what kind of socialism you're talking about and what stage of socialism you're talking about. So there are different kinds of socialism and different tendencies within the socialist movement, and different socialists are going to give you different answers to this question. An anarchist might say that people who are creative are going to be willing to be creative and produce things without the need of being paid for those things. Whereas a more traditional Marxist or Leninist who believes in a transitionary period between the overthrow of capitalism and the realization of communism might say that while there still exists some form of currency, authors and creative people, musicians and filmmakers will have the opportunity to work and receive a fair wage for their contribution to the society. And so if you want to write a book and produce that book, then you can, and you will receive, payment based on how well that book sells, probably. And then in addition to that, you will also have the guarantees that you can still live a normal, functional life. So even if, for example, your book doesn't sell well, you still have a constitutional guarantee to a place to live and food to eat and water to drink and clothes to wear and that kind of thing. So even if you don't earn as much money as a self-employed author as you might have hoped, you will still be guaranteed, the chance to live and be alive. You'll still have, of course, free access to healthcare and education. And that's kind of the lower early stage of socialism we're talking about. Whereas in the later stages, we might start talking about systems that might look similar to universal basic income, or abolishing currency altogether and working on a sort of gift economy system. But that's getting a bit more technical and complicated. But I think to answer your questions, of course, if you're a creative person and you want to work under socialism, you will be fairly compensated for your work.
Yeah, I imagine maybe if you want to take slightly more policy base, like we have had also in capitalist countries just literal like government commissions which support certain arts during what's his face FDR the New Deal. There was a lot of investments into really impressive artworks which were just commissioned by the government to make these things. And also with technology of today, Patreon, so I support us now, but literally like
well, yes, new technology does allow for new opportunities. I think for another example, in the USSR, the entirety of the USSR, but I think especially after the 30s, the government spent a lot of money and effort on promoting the creative arts, and they built opera houses and museums and art galleries, and they would commission artists and musicians and authors and all kinds of creative people to create artworks. And in the Eastern Bloc, all over the Eastern Bloc, including the Soviet Union, you can find bus stops and murals on apartments and street art and just art everywhere, statues and sculptures, and all of that was commissioned by the government, by artists living in those places. And so basically wherever you went, you could see art, and it was art created by the people living in that society, and they were paid by the government to do those things.
And you can find a lot of things, or I can anyway find a lot of things that I disagree with in the Soviet way of doing it. But I definitely think one of the more common ways of a socialist way of promoting art and publishing art is through the state. So like just the state publishing books, the state publishing movies. This is seen in capitalist societies too, where you have nationalized movie studios where the government directly funds it to make movies. This is very common in Europe, for instance.
We actually, I think we talked about that a few episodes ago, about how Soviet cinema was, pioneering.
Oh my God, yes. I mean, all of the movies you love from Hollywood wouldn't have been possible without the technological advancements of the Moscow Conservatory.
Anyway, second question that we received.
Yes.
We received a question from Mad Raccoon, who asked, do you think that every country on Earth could be communist?
Yes.
Yeah, let's hope so.
I mean, they could, yes.
Hypothetically, yes. Realistically, and perhaps pessimistically, probably not all at once, probably not every single one. I feel like a lot of it, hinges on the US.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I was just about to say.
If we can get that one to sort of, at least turn a little bit, like Bernie would be a nice step in the direction, but like also we need some constitutional reforms. Just if we could get the US.
If we could get basically the US to not intervene much,
yes,
that would just create lots of space already.
If we could somehow get the American domino to fall into something more welcoming and accepting of socialism, I feel like the whole world could turn socialist or communist. Sure.
Socialist first and then eventually communist is how it usually goes in the theory of things, but Okay, so now time for the Humanities Good Corner.
Yes, I'm doing it this week. So, for my Humanities Good Corner, I'd like to talk about a guy called Damaskinos of Athens. He was the Archbishop of the Greek Orthodox Church of Greece, surprisingly enough, from 1941 to 1949 when he died. And during the Nazi occupation of Greece, he got into quite a few fights with the Nazis and their puppet government. And when the Nazis started to begin their deportations of the Jewish population in 1943, he formally protested in a letter he sent and published to to the puppet government, which makes him the only European head of a church to formally declare his opposition to the Holocaust. After this letter was published, the head of the SS, Jürgen Stroop, who had been in charge of crushing the Warsaw Ghetto uprising, he had been put in charge of Greece, and when he found out about the letter, he threatened to have Damaskinos executed by a firing squad. In response, Damaskinos replied that, according to the traditions of the Greek Orthodox Church, our priests are hanged, not shot. Please respect our traditions. So basically, fuck off. Which is nice.
That's interesting.
It's very brave. After the exchange, he more or less immediately contacted the chief of police of Athens, Everett, and told him that he had made up his mind with God, and they together would have to save as many Jews as they could. And together they would forge about 27,000 documents of baptismal records, passports, etc., to provide to Jews to prove that they aren't Jews to the Nazis. He also ordered the priests of his church to give as many Jews fake baptismal records, and offering them Christian names, and giving them refuge from the Nazi checkups and deportations. Also commanding the monasteries and covens in Athens and the surrounding area to shelter Jews, and particularly asking members of the clergy to take in Jewish children and keep them safe from the Nazis. And although most of the Jewish population in Greece, about 87%, would still perish during the occupation, he still helped to save many lives. And that is my contribution to the Humanity is Good corner. Damaskinos of Athens. And if
that sounds like a real badass.
He was. But there's a lot of examples of badassery in the Greek Orthodox Church during that time period. So
yeah,
worth looking up.
You might, listeners might be asking, why would you have a Humanity's Good corner where you talk about the Nazis? Well, because saying that humanity is good isn't the same as saying that humanity or all humans are always good, absolutely. Because, of course, we recognize that there have been some real arseholes throughout history. But the point of the Humanity's Good corner is to provide a bit of light in that darkness and a bit of optimism, and to hammer in the point that humanity is capable of both great good and great evil, and we want to try to emphasize the good part.
Even in the face of great evil, people can still do great good.
Yes.
Yeah, there were a lot of unsung heroes during the Nazi occupation of Europe who helped save a lot of lives, who aren't being remembered as clearly as some others, but there are a lot
they all
of
deserve
heroes.
To be up here.
They do.
So that's our show.
Yes.
Thank you for tuning in.
And if you have an uplifting story to share, it can be historical or personal or just an anecdote that makes you feel good, you can send it to shitislandshow@gmail.com. Thank you for listening.
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 Thank you for listening.